"Burn it," Adrian shouted, loud enough to rattle the glass water pitcher. "She gets nothing." His voice hit the paneled walls, sharp as a knife on ceramic. If you'd been there with me, you would have heard the clock first, the slow, stubborn tick above the certificates. Then the paper sigh as Mr. Bell placed his palm on the will and didn't flinch. I kept my fingers wrapped around a teacup that wasn't mine, a chipped white saucer with a hairline crack running through it like a vein. My name is Ruth, and grief has made me careful. I sat very still, because when a son behaves like a stranger, stillness is the only dignity you can afford in public. "Mr. Hale's wishes will be respected," Mr. Bell said. His tone stayed calm, almost fatherly, but his jaw worked once, the way a man tests a loose tooth. He folded his glasses, set them on a blue folder, and looked at Adrian with the kind of patience that comes from watching families fall apart for a living. Adrian didn't look at me. He watched the folder, eyes bright and hungry. "She manipulated him," he said. "Ask anyone. She's confused. She can't handle the house, the accounts, any of it." His wedding band flashed when he pointed, a quick, cold blink under the office lamp. I tasted the metal of the spoon I hadn't used. My husband, Arthur, used to say the truth doesn't shout. It waits. That thought arrived like a hand on my shoulder. I breathed. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish, with the distant ghost of someone's cologne from the hallway. I had tucked Arthur's scarf into my handbag before we left the house. I wanted something of him near my skin. "We're not burning anything," Mr. Bell said quietly. He lifted the blue folder as if it held a sleeping bird. "And we're not done." The words settled in the air. Done. Not done. Every muscle in my back took notice. Adrian laughed without smiling. "What else is there?" Mr. Bell slid a smaller sleeve from the folder. Cream stock, edges deckled, a red wax seal pressed with Arthur's signet. My breath hitched. The wax looked like a tiny full moon, perfectly unbroken. The clock ticked. Tick, 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 a sound that has no loyalty to any of us. "Mrs. Hale," Mr. Bell said, meeting my eyes, "there is one more page." My teacup clicked against its saucer, a tiny betrayal of sound. I steadied it with both hands. Across the table, Adrian's fingers curled, then opened, as if he were rehearsing the motion of taking something away. Mr. Bell positioned the envelope between us, seal facing the ceiling, and reached for a letter opener. "Shall we proceed?" he asked. I felt the old floor tilt under my shoes, just enough to remind me that gravity is a choice only for people who have never been widowed. I lifted my chin and gave the smallest nod. The blade kissed the wax. The letter opener slid cleanly, and the seal gave with a soft sigh, like a held breath finally allowed to leave the room. Mr. Bell didn't rush. He turned the envelope so both of us could see, easing out thick cream paper that carried a faint scent of the cedar drawers Arthur loved. The clock above us kept time, as if it were being paid by the tick. "Read it," Adrian said. He was trying for board, but his knee bounced under the polished table, tap tap, a private metronome. He'd stopped calling me Mom, somewhere between the funeral flowers and this office chair. Mr. Bell adjusted his glasses and smoothed the page with two careful fingers, the way you pet a skittish animal. His voice was gentle, but the words had corners. "This is a codicil to the last will and testament of Arthur Hale." He paused, eyes flicking to me. "It was delivered to my office by Mr. Hale personally and held under instruction not to be opened until the formal reading." Heat pricked the back of my neck. "Arthur, you secretive man." The scarf in my handbag felt heavier, as if the fabric remembered his shoulders better than I did. "It's not valid," Adrian snapped. "Anyone could—" "Let him finish," I said, and surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. My teacup had stopped shaking. I set the spoon aside. The little click it made on porcelain sounded like a decision. Mr. Bell read, "I make the following clarifications and safeguards, not out of distrust, but out of love. If you are hearing this, it means I have left Ruth too soon, and I wish for her to be safe, comfortable, and sovereign in her choices." My husband's name inked itself across the room without him needing to be alive to speak it. I closed my eyes for a second. Just one. Adrian exhaled a laugh that didn't belong in any family. "Flowery," he said. "Is there a point?" "There is," Mr. Bell answered, and continued. Lines about the house, about minimizing interference, about consequences for any heir who attempts to undermine Ruth's autonomy. Each phrase found the places I'd been bruised and pressed there, not cruelly, just to remind me I could still feel. "I never undermined anything," Adrian said. His wedding band flashed again. He sat back, stretched, tried to wear nonchalance like a suit that didn't quite fit. Mr. Bell stopped reading. He lifted the page and peered at the bottom margin, as if noticing something Arthur had tucked away for a private audience. "There appears to be an attachment," he murmured. He tilted the paper toward the light. I leaned in, breath held, the lemon polish and old paper scent deepening around us. Beneath the final paragraph, the cream stock had a small rectangle of shadow, something thin pressed under a taped flap, hidden where a careless eye would never look. "Mrs. Hale," Mr. Bell said softly, inviting me closer. I slid my chair forward, the floor whispering under the legs, and saw the corner of a metal edge winking up from the page like a secret that had waited long enough. Mr. Bell lifted the bottom edge of the page and, with a librarian's care, loosened a strip of clear tape I hadn't noticed. The paper resisted once, then yielded. Something small and metal slid into his palm with a tiny bell of a sound. A key. Old brass, cut in a pattern I knew the way you know your own handwriting. The clock marked the moment with 3 smug ticks. Adrian leaned forward so fast his chair legs scraped. "What is that supposed to be?" he said, voice light, eyes hard. Mr. Bell didn't answer him. He tilted the codicil again and revealed a second layer, a narrow slip of card, folded in half and tucked so flat it had become part of the page. He unfolded it and placed it between us. Arthur's hand met me across the table in blue ink. "Ruth, trust the key, not the voices." I pressed my fingers to the inside of my wrist, where my pulse behaves like a stubborn child, quick when I need slow. Trust the key. I remembered how Arthur kept duplicates on a ring by the back door, labeled in his neat block letters: shed, desk, meter, and one that never wore a tag at all. Some doors should be remembered. "Not announced," he'd joked once, handing me the unlabeled one like a secret handshake. I had put it in the drawer with the tea towels and forgotten it existed. Grief is a thief that replaces pockets with holes. "That's ridiculous," Adrian said. "He was ill, he was confused, he was specific," I said, surprising myself again with the way my voice didn't tremble. Mr. Bell passed the key across the table. The brass was cool, like a coin you bite to test, and heavier than it looked. The teeth were uneven, particular, purposeful. Mr. Bell returned to the text. "There's an additional clause," he said. "Mr. Hale instructs that this codicil remains in force and that any attempt to coerce or endanger Ruth's independence by any heir triggers forfeiture." Adrian's laugh chipped the air. "So now paper can accuse people?" "Paper remembers," Mr. Bell said mildly. "That is its entire occupation." I tucked the key into the small zippered pocket of my handbag, the one where I keep bobby pins and a folded photo of Arthur grinning with flour on his nose. The handbag rustled, and with it the scarf I'd brought, wool, faintly cedar, a whisper of him when I pressed it to my cheek on quiet nights. "Where does it open?" Mr. Bell asked. More to me than to anyone. His tone was careful, an invitation, not an interrogation. I thought of the places in our house that still held Arthur's geometry. The narrow desk in his workshop, the cedar trunk in the attic, the little tin box he called a museum for lost screws. The clock above us offered another unhelpful tick, as if to say it would wait, but I shouldn't. "I have an idea," I said, closing my fingers around the outline of the key through leather. Adrian sat back, smiled like a man posing for a photograph, and tightened his wedding band with his thumb. "Good," he said softly. "Then let's see what it unlocks." I didn't tell him that I already did. The hallway outside Mr. Bell's office smelled like old carpet, copy toner, and something sweet that didn't belong there. a powdery perfume with a peppered edge. The elevator chimed and shut. The scent stayed, a stubborn ribbon in the air. I tightened my grip on my handbag, the key, a small rectangle pressing against the leather like a heartbeat I could hold. "Keep the codicil safe," Mr. Bell said quietly as he walked us to the door. His shoes made soft clicks on the marble, patient as a metronome. "If anything feels off, call me before you confront anyone. Paper, Mrs. Hale, is only as safe as the hands touching it." Adrian had already moved ahead, pretending to scroll his phone, pretending he wasn't listening. "We're fine," he said without looking back. "We're all grown-ups here." The word grown-ups fluttered past me like a moth flying toward a hot lamp. I nodded to Mr. Bell and stepped into the hall. The perfume grew stronger near the little bench under the framed diplomas. I recognized almost every scent I wear, the citrus I spray before church, the lavender that helps me sleep. But this one was foreign and expensive, the sort of fragrance that announces a person before their shoes do. I sat for a moment and slipped open my handbag. The scarf was folded on top, wool that still remembered the cedar chest and the weight of my husband's shoulders. I lifted it to my face. Beneath the cedar, there it was again. The same sweetness, faint but definite, woven into the wool, like a rumor that refused to die. Someone had touched what belonged to Arthur. Not an idea, a scent. Perfume lingers where fingers have been. Adrian glanced back. "You coming, Ruth?" He said my name like a stranger might, polite and sharp. "In a second," I answered. I smoothed the scarf and tucked it deeper, behind my checkbook and the old photograph of Arthur with flour on his nose. The key I slid under the pocket seam where I keep bobby pins, where fabric folds over itself and only a searching thumb would find it. Trust the key, not the voices. Arthur's handwriting echoed in my chest. In the elevator, Adrian watched the floor numbers glow. 3, 2, 1. "You're not angry, are you?" he asked, pleasant as a waiter. The perfume shadowed us all the way down. "I'm paying attention," I said. Outside, the wind lifted my hair and cooled the warmth in my cheeks. We walked to the car without speaking. In the reflection of the office windows, I saw us, a mother beside a man she raised, two strangers wearing family like a borrowed coat. At home, I opened the front door and stood in the quiet entry, something immediately, imperceptibly wrong, like a picture frame tilted 1 degree. I set my handbag on the console table and turned toward the kitchen. The refrigerator light blinked on. The spot above it looked bare, indecent. The blue savings jar wasn't there. The space above the refrigerator looked naked, 2 pale circles in the dust where the blue savings jar had sat for years like a small lighthouse. Arthur used to drop coins in it after buying bread, the thin chime a promise that ordinary days had weight. I stood very still, listening for a sound that wasn't there. "Where's the jar?" I asked. Adrian set his keys on the counter, the way a person sets down an argument. "I moved it. Clutter, Mom. Sorry, Ruth. It looks messy when people come by. You know how buyers notice things." His smile lived on the surface of his face and nowhere else. "We don't have buyers," I said. "Soon," he answered, gentle as a threat. "Less for you to manage." I opened the pantry. Behind the flour canister, the jar blinked up at me. Blue glass gone cloudy with fingerprints. It felt lighter, the way a book feels wrong when a chapter is missing. Only a scatter of coins remained, dull against the glass like tired stars. The paper label Arthur had written, House, was half peeled, the O torn so it read H use, as if someone had bitten a piece out of our home. "The envelope?" I asked, already knowing. I keep grocery cash in a clipped stack under the napkins. When I slid it out, it bent with a softness that meant absence. "I took a little for gas," Adrian said quickly. "We'll reimburse. Lydia's setting up something easier for you. Automatic. You don't have to fuss with paper." Paper remembers. Mr. Bell's phrase folded itself into my ears. I pushed the envelope back where it belonged and felt my cheeks grow warm. The kitchen smelled like lemon soap. and, underneath it, a faint, sweet perfume that had never belonged to me. I lifted the jar's lid. The scent clung to the tin like a whispered explanation. On the mantel, Arthur's ring box sat slightly open, its hinge yawning as if someone had asked it a question. I touched the lid. Inside, the ring stared up with its usual cold eye, but it looked repositioned, like a photograph someone had straightened and didn't quite return. My phone buzzed. A message from the bank. A new device had signed in. "If this wasn't you, contact us." The words prickled along my skin. Adrian reached for the phone, casual, palm out. "Let me handle that. Tech stuff." "I'm fine," I said, sliding the phone into my pocket, feeling the hard comfort of the key in my handbag answer like a tapped code. Trust the key, not the voices. I could hear Arthur say it, not in my ear exactly, but in the place where courage lives. Adrian picked up the blue jar and turned it once, watching the last coins tumble. "You know," he said, almost tender, "jars are for children. We'll do this the right way." "Then we'll start by asking Mr. Keene at the bank what the right way is," I said, steady as I could make it. The jar's lid clicked shut. From the metal came the unmistakable breath of that same perfume. Banks always smell like dry air and plastic plants. The pens wear little chains like leashes, and the floor polish turns every step into a polite whisper. I took a number, sat beneath a television that announced interest rates I didn't care about, and held my handbag close so the key pressed a calm rectangle against my palm. Trust the key, not the voices. Arthur's handwriting steadied me better than the chair did. "Mrs. Hale?" The teller led me to Mr. Keene's office, a glass box with one soft chair and a dish of wrapped mints no one ever eats. He stood when I entered, straightened a tie patterned with tiny anchors, and gave me the kind of look people reserve for widows and complicated forms. We had met before. He knew Arthur by name. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "Paper remembers," I said. "I need mine to remember me." His mouth tugged at one corner, almost a smile, almost a wince. He typed, screen glow reflecting in his glasses. "There's been activity," he said, careful as a surgeon. "New device logins, and something called Helper Access was created last week." "By my son," I said. The words tasted like old pennies. Mr. Keene's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Do you want that removed?" "I want to breathe without asking permission." He nodded. "We'll revoke it." He clicked, a soft digital thunk that sounded like a lock turning. "There are also 2 automatic transfers set up, small, frequent amounts to a joint wallet ending in 71 for household bills." My throat went tight. "Freeze them." "We'll cancel future ones," he said, then printed a stack of forms that slid out warm. Smelling like singed paper, he turned them so I could see. "Initial here. Sign here, here, and here." The pen's chain tinked against the desk. I wrote my name slowly, Ruth Hale, as if learning it fresh in this bright little aquarium where grown people ask permission to be themselves. A shadow moved past the glass. "Adrian." He raised a hand, palm open, smiling like a man selling kindness at a discount. I didn't wave. Mr. Keene clocked him and, without looking away from me, pressed a button that frosted the glass. The world became milk and outlines. "For your security," he said. He lowered his voice. "There's one more item." A pending transfer scheduled for midnight, larger than the rest. It routes to an account labeled Home Care Solutions. The contact name on file is Lydia Hale. Heat flared under my collar. Perfume swam up from the wool scarf in my bag as if it had been waiting for its cue. "Can you stop it?" I asked. "Yes," he said simply, "but I need your confirmation." He slid one last form across the desk, and his eyes softened in a way that made me feel both older and sharper. "Also, Mrs. Hale, earlier today someone called claiming to be you to add another signer to your accounts." My hand hovered over the line where my name should go. The clock on his wall ticked 3 soft times, patient as breath. "Who?" I said. He swallowed, then read the note on his screen. They gave the name before the line went dead. "Adrian Hale," Mr. Keene said, eyes steady over the top of the screen. "That's the name they gave before the call cut." The clock in his office answered with a small, indifferent tick, as if to say, "Of course." I signed where he pointed. Each loop of my name felt like a fence post driven into wet ground. Revoke, cancel, deny. The words didn't sound like armor yet, but they would learn. Mr. Keene unfroze the glass. The world swam back into focus. Adrian lifted 2 coffees and a peace offering he hadn't purchased for me yesterday, or the day before that, or ever. I nodded to Mr. Keene, slipped a mint into my pocket I wouldn't eat, and walked past my son without taking the cup. "Everything sorted?" Adrian asked, soft as a padded door. "Paper remembers," I said, and kept walking. At home, the house held its breath. I placed my handbag on the hall table, pressed the key under the lining with my thumb, and listened. No car in the drive, no voices. Only the refrigerator's steady hum and the far-off complaint of a floorboard settling into itself. The air upstairs tasted of dust and something older, Cedar's ghost. My feet found the attic ladder by memory, the way hands find a rosary in the dark. The attic light is a pull chain that clicks like a cheap camera. Motes rose in the beam, slow as snowfall. Arthur's cedar trunk sat where it always had, its brass corners dulled to a kind of patience. I knelt. The key slid into the lock with the intimacy of an old dance. Turn, catch, release. The lid lifted, and the room changed temperature, the cedar breathing out a memory that cut through every other scent, even the thin ribbon of unfamiliar perfume that seems to follow me now. Inside, ledgers bound in black cloth, their edges fretted by years of turning. A flat metal tin he once called the Museum of Lost Screws. And on top, as if he had just stepped away to fetch tea, a plain envelope with my name. Beneath it, a small thumb drive taped to an index card in his block letters, "Read if I'm gone." I touched the envelope first. The paper was thick, as if it had eaten other letters and kept their strength. My hands wanted to tear it open. My ears wanted to hear the click of a computer port and Arthur's voice riding in on electricity. Trust the key, not the voices. But sometimes the voice you need is a ghost you love. Tires whispered on gravel outside. A car door shut. Another. Perfume climbed the stairs a second before footsteps did. I slipped the envelope inside my sweater and palmed the thumb drive. The attic ladder creaked, a question asked by wood. "Mom?" Adrian called from below. Too bright, too late. I closed the trunk halfway, the lid hovering like a held breath. I lowered the attic lid until it hovered, not shut, not open, the way people keep their faces when they're pretending nothing is happening. "Up here," I called, because silence makes guilt louder. The key pressed a cool rectangle against my palm through the handbag, and the thumb drive sat in my closed fist like a small, obedient heart. Adrian's head appeared at the top of the ladder, smile staged for a photograph. "You shouldn't climb alone," he said. Behind him, Lydia's voice floated up, soft and sugared. "We brought pastries." "I'm managing," I said. I slid the drive into my sweater cuff where the knit is loose and forgiving. "I was looking for blankets." He scanned the trunk the way a crow scans a shiny thing. "Dad kept junk up here," he said, almost fond. "You know you don't have to hold on to every—" "Memory?" I offered. Perfume rose ahead of Lydia like a calling card. She put a hand on the ladder but didn't climb. "We'll set tea," she called. "You sit." I shut the trunk gently. The lock clicked, polite and final. In the bedroom, I set my handbag on the quilt, slid the thumb drive out of my cuff, and closed the door until it kissed the latch. Not locked. Widows know the difference between privacy and a dare. My old laptop wheezed awake, screen glow turning my hands pale. The drive found its place with a neat little chime. A folder opened. One file. Arthur Workshop. My breath stuttered. I pressed play. There he was, Arthur in his work shirt, sawdust in his hair like light. He sat on the old stool, the one with the wobble. "Ruth," he said, and my name felt like water, like relief. "If you're watching this, I left too soon. You're going to be kind to people who aren't kind back. Don't." He smiled, quick and crooked. "Somebody has been very keen on consolidating accounts. They said we should streamline and update the will. I said yes to a lot of things in our life, but I didn't say yes to that." He lifted a page, the cream stock, the wax seal I'd already seen reborn on Mr. Bell's table. "I filed this with Bell. If anyone contests, show him this, and show the judge, if it gets that ugly." His eyes softened, then sharpened. "There's a key in the codicil. You know which lock." A floorboard eased in the hall. The doorknob breathed under a testing hand. I slid the volume down until Arthur's mouth moved like prayer. He kept speaking, voice low. "If they say you're confused, tell the bank what you want and make them write it down. Paper remembers. If they try to move you, call Bell first. If they raise their voice, hang up. If they whisper, hang up faster." "Ruth?" Lydia tapped, knuckles gentle as sugar tongs. "Tea is ready." Arthur leaned closer to the camera. "And if they're in the house while you're watching this, my girl, you already know to put this away." The screen held his face, patient. I clicked pause. The thumb drive slid warm into my palm. The doorknob turned. I opened the bedroom door with a smile I keep for doctors and strangers. Lydia stood in the hall holding a tray. Pale porcelain, a teapot with a gold crack mended down its side, 2 cups, and a bowl of tomato soup dotted with parsley, the way magazines suggest kindness. The perfume halo around her arrived before she did, a sweet, peppered ribbon that curled into the room like punctuation. "We brought lunch forward," she said. "You haven't eaten." "I've been busy remembering," I said, which is a kind of work people don't respect unless they've had to do it. We went downstairs. Adrian had laid out napkins and moved the blue savings jar to the center of the table as if it were a centerpiece and not a missing tooth. He tapped it once, and the coins made a thin, apologetic sound. "Eat something," he said, voice soft, wedding band flashing like a signal. "You'll feel steadier." I sat, set my handbag on the chair beside me, so the key pressed into my hip like a note folded into a pocket. Lydia ladled soup into a white bowl with a hairline crack, twin to the cup I'd held at Mr. Bell's. Steam rose in small ghosts. She stirred the tea. "Valerian and honey," she said. "It helps you rest. You haven't been sleeping." "I rest in chapters," I said, lifting the spoon. The first sip hovered. A slick sweetness surfaced beneath the honey, the sort that pretends to be kind. I touched the spoon to my lips, let the heat kiss, and set it down. "Hot," I said lightly. "Let it think about itself." We talked. Weather, the porch light that flickers, whether the hydrangeas need trimming, words like packing material around something breakable. Adrian tried a laugh, then tried on concern, then folded into charm. "Mom, Ruth, about the house," he began, and slid a manila envelope across the table, casual as a coaster. "Just an acknowledgement for the realtor to do a market survey. No commitment." The envelope waited. The clock ticked like it had paid admission. Lydia leaned her chin into her palm and watched me watch the paper. When their eyes met, I lifted the bowl, blew on the soup, and tilted, just enough to wet the spoon. I set it down again. "Tomato," I said. "Arthur's favorite." Adrian's smile didn't move. "He loved when you listened to me. He loved when people told the truth." I opened the envelope. On top was a short form, harmless font, friendly spacing. The title wore a sweater, "Consent to Temporary Management of Affairs." In the footer, a logo, Home Care Solutions. The same name Mr. Keene had read. "Oh," I said quietly, and folded the paper closed with the care you use for something that shouldn't bite you but might. "Not tonight." A silence arrived, set itself at the table, and crossed its legs. Lydia's eyes flicked to the untouched tea. "It will cool," she said. "It should," I answered. My phone buzzed against the wood, face down. Adrian reached, then stopped when I didn't. I turned it over. A message previewed on the lock screen from Mr. Keene, attempted addition of signer denied. Call if this wasn't you. I felt the scarf in my bag shift with my breath. I looked at the tea, at the envelope, at my son. Before any of us could decide what to say next, the front door knocked. Once, then twice, then a third time, firm as a sentence. I opened the door to find Mrs. Doyle clutching a glass pie plate wrapped in foil and a dish towel with cherries on it. The late light silvered her hair, her eyes did the rest. She lowered her voice as if grief had ears. "I baked too much," she said, then leaned in the smallest inch. "And I brought you information." Behind me, Lydia's perfume reached the threshold first, sweet and peppered. A ribbon that tried to look innocent. Adrian called from the dining room, pleasant as a commercial. "We're in the middle of lunch, Mrs. Doyle." "I won't stay," she said brightly, but her hand found my forearm, a warm punctuation mark. I took the pie and led her into the hall. The ticking clock over the console counted our breaths. From the dining table, the blue savings jar glinted like a loyal witness. Mrs. Doyle tilted her head toward the living room with its polite couches and unwatered plant, the room where people behave. "I was at the dentist in the Lawton building last week," she murmured, eyes flicking past my shoulder. "Same floor as Mr. Bell. I saw your Lydia step off the elevator with a manila envelope, big as a Sunday roast. She didn't see me, but I saw her." She sniffed once, delicate. "And I smelled her before I did. Roses with pepper, not your usual lemon." Heat skated under my skin. The wool scarf in my handbag seemed to breathe, releasing that same not-mine sweetness. "Are you sure?" I asked, though my body had already answered. "Darling, I'm old, not blind." She slid a business card from her pocket, Bell and Keene embossed in blue, and tapped the tiny date he'd stamped for her inquiry. "Same day, same hour? If anyone tries to tell you you're confused, send them to me. I collect details the way other women collect china." Lydia's voice floated in, sugared. "Everything okay?" She stood in the archway with a teacup and that careful smile she wears like foundation. Adrian hovered behind her, a shadow with a wedding band. "We were just admiring the pie," I said. The bowl of tomato soup on the table had formed a thin skin, the way soups do when conversations go honest. The envelope he'd slid toward me lay where I'd left it, the logo facing up like a name tag at a party. Mrs. Doyle glanced once, took everything in, and patted my wrist. "I'll call later," she announced at a normal volume. "For the room." Then, softer. "For me alone. Write things down, Ruth. Paper remembers." After she left, the air reshaped itself around the three of us. Adrian set the teacup down too close to the edge. Lydia steadied it with 2 fingers that didn't tremble. "Your neighbor is spirited," she said. "She is," I agreed, and moved the blue jar back to its clean circles above the refrigerator, as if returning a lighthouse to its post. "Lydia," I added, not looking away from the jar, "which envelope were you carrying out of the Lawton building the week before the funeral?" The house went very quiet, like a person deciding whether to tell the truth. Lydia's smile thinned until it showed bone. "Appointment papers," she said, bright as a showroom lamp. "Dentist. You know the Lawton building has half the city in it." She lifted her cup, hands perfectly steady. The perfume around her didn't blink. Adrian chuckled, a soft bark meant to train me. "Mom, Ruth, this paranoia isn't helping. We're trying to make things easy." "Then you won't mind if we ask Mr. Bell what she carried," I said, and slid my handbag strap over my shoulder. The key pressed its little rectangle into my side, reassuring as a tucked note in church. "Today." They exchanged a look that thought it was private. "We're busy," Adrian said. Lydia set her cup down without a ring on the saucer. "Another time." "I'll manage," I answered, and left the soup to cool its temper. Mr. Bell's reception smelled like paper and polish. The clock on his wall spoke in the same calm ticks as the one over my console at home, as if time had a franchise. Serena, the junior clerk with a neat bob and eyes that don't miss things, met me with a folder already in her hands. "I was just about to call you," she said. "We've revisited intake logs." She lowered her voice, a shade of privacy pulled down. "Mrs. Hale, your daughter-in-law visited this office the week before the funeral." Heat rose, the kind that remembers being younger and fooled. "Purpose?" She flicked to a page. Asked broadly about destroying superseded pages, and whether a later draft voids earlier protections if the later draft is misplaced. Her mouth tightened. Professional, not unkind. "We gave no advice." Mr. Bell was out. "I told her only that we retain documents as instructed." Mr. Bell appeared in his doorway, sleeves rolled, glasses in hand. "Come in, Ruth." On his desk, the blue folder sat like a steady boat. He laid a ledger-thin book beside it and opened to a stamped entry. "Arthur Hale, delivery of sealed codicil, received by Bell and Keene, held unopened pending reading." "He brought it himself," Mr. Bell said. "Gave me strict instructions." He tapped the margin, where Arthur's neat block letters repeated, "Do not release early. Do not discuss contents. Protect Ruth." I touched the ink with my eyes, not my hand. The scarf in my bag exhaled cedar, cutting the sweetness that had followed me all morning. "Paper remembers," Arthur had said through other people's mouths. "What now?" I asked. "Now we make it official," Mr. Bell said. "I'll file a notice with the court and a preservation request for all communications related to your accounts. If anyone suggests you're confused, we will let the record answer." He closed the ledger. Serena's intercom buzzed, a small, apologetic sound. She stepped in, color gone from her face. "There's a man in the lobby," she said. "Courier. He has papers for you, Mrs. Hale. He says they require your immediate acknowledgement." Mr. Bell looked at me the way a doctor looks before he names a thing. "Shall we see what your son is filing?" The courier stood in Mr. Bell's lobby with a clipboard and a neutrality that felt hired by the hour. His satchel bulged with other people's worst days. "Mrs. Ruth Hale?" he asked. I signed for an envelope thick enough to bruise. Across the seal, someone had rubber-stamped "Urgent" in red, a swollen echo of Arthur's wax I'd seen split open that morning. We took it into Mr. Bell's office. He slit the top with his steady letter opener, the blade whispering through paper like a confident rumor. Inside, a petition for emergency guardianship. The title was large in a font that pretended to be kind. Below it, my name stood alone, as if I were an island that needed a lighthouse. Mr. Bell read, mouth firm. "They allege confusion, misplacement of funds, susceptibility to undue influence." His finger tapped a paragraph where the sentences wore suits. "They cite a vendor called Home Care Solutions as anticipated caregiver pending court approval." He glanced up. We both heard Lydia's perfume without smelling it. There were attachments, statements from concerned family, photocopies of transactions they called erratic, a letter on home care letterhead requesting expedited access to my home for safety preparation. At the bottom, Adrian's signature leaned forward like a man in a hurry. The clock over the bookcase said nothing and kept going, Mr. Butler. Bell flipped to the last page. "Hearing in 3 days," he said calmly, as if naming weather. "They're asking the judge for temporary control of decisions and accounts until a capacity assessment is completed." My throat tightened around a word I didn't want to swallow. Temporary turns permanent when the wrong people say please. He set the packet down as if laying a hand on a shoulder. "We will object. Today." He spoke to Serena through the open door. "File counter notice. Attach bank revocation, device alerts, and the proposed consent they pushed across her table." Then to me, softer. "Write a short statement describing events in concrete detail. Who, what, where, names, smells, objects. Judges like facts that sit still." "Paper remembers," I murmured. "It does," he said. "Do you have anything else Arthur left that may help us? Notes, recordings?" His question walked the length of my bones. I thought of the attic, the cedar breath, the thumb drive warm from my computer's port. Trust the key, not the voices. "I have direction," I said. From him. Good. He slid a yellow pad toward me. Tonight, stay with a friend if you can. Do not sign anything. Keep the codicil under separate cover. And Ruth, if they press T or forms or pity on you, say no and let the silence do the work. Outside, the late light lay flat on the sidewalk. On the drive home, I counted street lamps instead of fears. At the house, the hallway mirror returned my face to me and added 10 years I didn't ask for. I set the petition on the console beneath the ticking clock and smoothed the scarf over it like a bandage. Upstairs, the floorboard near the attic whispered its old complaint. I thought of Arthur's toolbox and a small drawer that always stuck, then let go if you lifted and nudged at once. I washed my hands, dried them, and went to find that drawer. Arthur's workshop still holds his geometry. The pegboard keeps its tidy constellations of wrenches. The stool with the wobble waits where his weight used to correct it. I pull open the shallow drawer on the old oak bench. It sticks, the way it always has. And then, lift, nudge, gives. Inside, tape measures, a carpenter's pencil worn to a sermon stub, 3 screws that lost their destinies. And at the back, where a strip of felt looks too clean, my fingertip finds a lip of wood that isn't supposed to be there. A false bottom. Trust the key, not the voices, he'd written. Keys aren't always metal. I pry the edge with a thin putty knife. The panel lifts. Nestled in a square of flannel is a tiny recorder, the kind you could hide in a pocket and forget until it remembers for you. I press play. A red eye wakes. Static first, like rain on a tin roof. Then a chair leg skates. My son's voice arrives, casual and hot. Once we void the codicil, Adrian says, the trust reverts. We'll move her somewhere quiet. Sell the house before she can change her mind. He taps something, his ring against the table. It makes a bright, impatient click. List it while sympathy is high. Lydia's voice follows, sugared and sure. I'll handle Belle. They toss superseded pages all the time if a newer draft is in play. She lowers her tone, and I have to lean closer, as if my ear could cross months. The clinic said valerian makes people agreeable. We'll bring tea. The workbench steadies me with its grain. The recorder hums like a small, brave animal. In the background of their voices, I hear my house, our refrigerator's particular hum, the balcony door that never quite seals on the first try, the clock's faint tick. They planned this inside my walls. Guardianship is faster if she signs something, temporary management, anything with consent in the title. Adrian's voice smiles. Language that wears slippers. Then we hurry, Lydia answers, before Belle reads the room for her. A car shivers the gravel outside the workshop. The red light on the recorder blinks, as if it, too, is listening for doors. I pause the playback, rewind 2 seconds, listen again, letting the words cut a clean outline around my fear so I know where to place it. Paper remembers. Machines do too. My phone vibrates in my pocket. Mr. Bell, call me when safe. I slip the recorder into the wool scarf's folds, the cedar lifting to meet it like an oath, and tuck both deep in my handbag. On the bench, I leave the drawer open a careless inch. Let them believe I am sloppy if it buys me a breath. The back door key turns in the lock. The back door opened on its second try, the way it always does when someone knows the house well enough to bully it. Adrian stepped in without calling hello. Lydia a cool slip of perfume behind him. Their faces wore weather that hadn't touched the sky. "Thought we'd check on you," Adrian said, already scanning the room for the shape of my day. "You left so quickly from Belle's." "I was done being explained to," I answered, sliding my handbag strap higher so the recorder and scarf rode close to my ribs. The workshop smelled like cedar and iron and the faint sweetness that doesn't belong to me. Lydia lifted a paper bag. "Buns," she said, "and tea." Her smile was careful as a scalpel. "Why don't we sit in the kitchen where it's brighter?" "Change that porch bulb for me first," I said, handing Adrian the step stool before he could hand me anything. He took it, because muscle memory is faster than schemes. While he fiddled at the threshold, I carried the handbag upstairs like it contained a sleeping bird. In the closet, the black dress I'd worn to the funeral waited under plastic. I slid my hand into the side pocket and felt paper sigh against my fingers. A receipt, folded and softened by hours I hadn't noticed. The shop name shone in silver script I recognized from glossy magazines. Beneath it, a line. Eau de parfum, roses, pepper. Time stamped 2 hours before we buried my husband. Lydia's handwriting on the back, parking code, looped with confidence. The clock on the landing ticked like a muffled metronome. I took a photo, then another with the scarf as backdrop, the cedar grain framing the numbers. Mr. Bell, found this in my dress pocket, I typed, and hit send before fear could argue. The phone hummed back almost at once. Bring it, today. Downstairs, the blue savings jar had returned to the center of the table, like a hostage on display. Lydia poured tea without asking, steam curling in scented punctuation. "Valerian and honey," she said. "You'll sleep." "I will," I said, setting the cup aside untouched. I laid the receipt on the table next to the manila envelope with Home Care's logo and pressed it flat with 2 fingers. "But first we need to understand this." Adrian stepped off the stool, wiped his hands like a man finishing a job, and saw the paper. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Lydia's eyes flicked, from the silver script to the timestamp to the scarf under my palm, and then up to me, calculating. "Where did you get that?" she asked, voice velveted, edge underneath. "In the pocket of the dress I wore to say goodbye to my husband," I said, "right before you visited Mr. Bell with an envelope." The house held its breath. My phone vibrated again, a single line from Mr. Bell. "I'm ready to file." Adrian reached for the receipt. I didn't move my hand. "Then let's go file it," I said, and the clock answered with one loud, unexpected tick. Mr. Bell met me at the door to his office like a man catching a falling plate. "Let's make a record," he said, and the phrase steadied me like a handrail. On his desk, the blue folder waited, wax seal broken, corners square. Serena brought in a tray, clear evidence bags, yellow tabs, a stapler that thumped like a tiny gavel. We worked in the soft industry of paper. The receipt from my funeral dress went onto the copier, its glossy script flattened into black proof. "Exhibit A," Mr. Bell wrote, neat as a schoolteacher. The manila envelope from Home Care Solutions became Exhibit B. He nodded at my handbag. I drew out the wool scarf first, the cedar rising to cut the sweetness that had followed me all week, and then the small recorder. Serena slipped both into a bag and sealed it with red tape. Exhibit C, Chain of Custody, her label read, and my name underneath, Ruth Hale, in ink that didn't waver. "We'll file a declaration," Mr. Bell said, phone tucked under his chin as he spoke to the clerk. "Affidavit from Mr. Keene, revoked access and attempted signer edition. Yes, under penalty of perjury, and we'll lodge a digital copy of the workshop video under seal." He covered the mouthpiece. "Do you have the drive?" "In here," I said, touching the inside pocket where I'd pinned it like a brooch no one could see. He smiled once, pinprick quick, like a man who believes you when you say you've brought your courage. He slid a legal pad toward me. "Write what happened, Ruth. Plain facts in small rooms. Names, dates that aren't dates, objects you can touch." I wrote. Blue savings jar moved, envelope lighter, perfume and scarf, bank alert. Tea I did not drink, receipt in funeral dress, words from the recorder, language that wears slippers. My handwriting looked like my mother's when she was determined to remain polite. Serena returned with a transcript sample. The recorder's voices turned into tidy lines that couldn't take themselves back. "Paper remembers." Arthur hummed through the machines. Mr. Bell signed, initialed, and stamped until the stack felt taller than fear. "We'll seek a temporary order preserving status quo," he said. "No realtors, no caregivers entering, no financial changes. Let the judge hear the last paragraph in the codicil out loud." The intercom buzzed. Serena's voice, low. "They're here." "Who?" I asked, though the answer had already changed the air. "Adrian Hale," she said, "and Mrs. Lydia Hale, with counsel." The hall outside our door filled with the faint, peppered sweetness I now recognize in my bones. The elevator chimed. A briefcase clicked open. Mr. Bell placed his hand on the blue folder as if it were someone's shoulder. "Ready?" he asked. I looked at the sealed bags, the stamped pages, the little recorder behind red tape, and felt Arthur's scarf warm against my wrist. "Ready," I said, and the doorknob turned. They came in a triangle: Adrian, Lydia, and a man in a navy suit whose smile had billing hours. The room cooled a degree. Lydia's perfume arrived first, the same sweet pepper that had stitched itself into Arthur's scarf. Mr. Bell greeted their lawyer like men who have met on opposite sides of the same river. "Let's be efficient," the man said, setting down a briefcase that clicked open with courtroom confidence. "My clients are concerned for Mrs. Hale's well-being." "I am concerned for Mrs. Hale's rights," Mr. Bell replied, palm resting on the blue folder as if it were a shoulder that needed steadying. Adrian's eyes skipped over the sealed evidence bags, A, B, C, and landed on me. "You look tired," he said softly, as if offering mercy he planned to invoice. "We can take this burden." "I can lift my own name," I answered. The key in my handbag pressed its calm rectangle against my hip, a tiny oath. We didn't stay long. Efficient men like calendars. Soon enough, wood and flags and the heavy carpet of a courtroom replaced the office hum. The ceiling carried every whisper. The judge wore the look of someone who has heard families try to rearrange truth into something comfortable. A clock near the seal ticked with civic patience. We took our places. I set Arthur's ring box on the table, then the old household ledger, then the blue folder in a neat row, the way you line up spices before you cook. Small witnesses. Lydia noticed and smoothed her skirt. Her lawyer leaned to murmur, and the perfume lifted like a cue. "Mrs. Hale," the judge said, voice even. "There is a petition before me to appoint an emergency guardian. Do you understand what that means?" "I do," I said, meeting her eyes. "It means someone else would decide when I can unlock my own front door." Mr. Bell stood. "Your Honor, we object to the petition and ask for preservation of the status quo. We have a codicil filed by the decedent, bank evidence revoking unauthorized access, a recorded conversation indicating an attempt to undermine Ms. Hale's autonomy, and documentation of pressure tactics, including drug-assisted tea and predatory consent forms." He gestured lightly. Serena, 2 rows back, held the exhibits like careful birds. Adrian's lawyer rose with the smile again. "Objection to characterization. We're talking about a loving son worried about his grieving mother." "Paper remembers," Mr. Bell said, almost kindly. "We invite the record to speak." The judge paged through the blue folder, stopping at the creamstock whose wax scar had already told its story. She glanced at me, then at Adrian, then back to the page. "This codicil references consequences for any heir who attempts to undermine Ruth's autonomy," she read, "and I see there's an addendum." Silence climbed the walls and sat in the rafters. "Counsel," she said, tapping the margin with one measured finger, "read the last paragraph into the record." Mr. Bell rose with the page in his hand. The clock ticked once, loud as a gavel. I placed my palm on Arthur's scarf and felt the cedar breathe. "Ready, Your Honor," he said, and began to speak. Mr. Bell held the page like a lantern. "The decedent writes," he said, voice level enough to carry, "that his first and abiding wish is that Ruth remain free to choose her own company, her home, and her quiet. He further states, any heir who attempts to coerce, isolate, medicate for compliance, or otherwise undermine Ruth's autonomy by petition, paperwork, or pressure shall forfeit all interest under this will. Attempt alone constitutes forfeiture." The words took their time arriving. They passed over the tables, stepped down the aisle, and found me where I sat with Arthur's scarf warm under my palm. The courtroom's clock answered with a single, civic tick. Paper remembers, I thought, and the thought felt like a chair being pulled out for me to sit. Lydia's lawyer started to object, then arranged his tie instead. Adrian's jaw moved left. then right, like a man trying to chew a story that had turned to bone. Lydia crossed one ankle over the other. The perfume lifted and settled, a sweet, peppered shrug. Mr. Bell continued, "The paragraph concludes, if this clause is read aloud, it is because someone has already tried to dim Ruth's voice. Judges, please help me keep her lamp lit. Signed, Arthur Hale." Silence stretched thin enough to see truth through it. The judge set the page down and looked first at me, then at Adrian. "Counsel," she said, "I want to understand the context of this codicil and the conduct alleged." Mr. Bell gestured to Serena. Exhibits A through C crossed the distance in careful hands, the perfume receipt pressed flat and factual, the home care consent with its slippers-on language, the small recorder behind red tape. In its plastic, the device looked like a caged heartbeat. The judge glanced at the label, then raised her eyes to Lydia. "This references tea, valerian and honey. It aids rest," Lydia said, smile soft as fabric. "Rest is not compliance," the judge replied, and the clerk's pen hesitated mid-scratch as if it wanted to applaud. Adrian's lawyer tried for warmth. "All families navigate grief awkwardly. My clients acted from concern." "Concern puts water on the stove," Mr. Bell said mildly. "Control stirs the pot." The judge folded her hands. "We will proceed carefully. I'm considering a temporary preservation order. Before I decide, I want to hear two things, the recorder and a short portion of the decedent's workshop video under seal." She nodded to the bailiff. "Set the player." Cables snaked across wood. Serena cued the file. My fingertips found the groove in Arthur's ring box, and the cedar in the scarf rose like a benediction. The courtroom settled into that strange half-breath that comes before a voice you love returns by electricity. "Ready?" the judge asked. The red light blinked. The first sound was the clock. The recorder spoke first in the language of my house. Clock tick, refrigerator hum, then my son's voice, smooth as a brochure. "Once we void the codicil, the trust reverts. We'll move her somewhere quiet." A bright ring click punctuated the line, his wedding band tapping wood. Lydia followed, sugared and sure. "Valerian makes people agreeable. We'll bring tea." In the back row, someone hissed in a breath. Even the bailiff's stance softened into listening. "Objection to context," their lawyer tried, but the judge lifted one calm palm and the room obeyed. Serena cued the workshop video. Arthur appeared in sawdust and afternoon light, my name in his mouth like prayer. "Ruth, paper remembers. If they whisper, 'Hang up faster,'" he said, and smiled the quick, crooked way he used to when fixing a hinge. Silence sat down between all of us and crossed its legs. The judge folded her hands. "Petition for emergency guardianship is denied," she said, voice without hurry. "I am entering a preservation order. No realtors, no caregivers, no account changes. Further, under the codicil's forfeiture clause," her finger touched the cream page, "I find an attempt to undermine Ms. Hale's autonomy. The clause speaks for itself." She glanced at the sealed exhibit. "Potential tampering and chemical compliance will be referred to the district attorney for review." Lydia's perfume wavered, a peppered tremor. Her lawyer whispered fast math at her shoulder. Adrian went very still, the way boys do when they remember there are adults in the room after all. He looked at me, not at the judge, not at Mr. Bell, but at me. And I felt something inside me step off a ledge and land on its feet. Mr. Bell exhaled once, then gathered our small witnesses, the ring box, the ledger, the blue folder, as if putting children's coats back on after a storm. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. Serena's pen made a last tidy note. The gavel's tap was gentle. People stood. Wood creaked. Outside the double doors, the hallway clock kept a steadier beat than the one that had watched Adrian shout, "Burn it," this morning. I pressed Arthur's scarf to my wrist and smelled cedar instead of fear. "Mom," Adrian said behind me, no polish left on the word. "Can we talk?" I turned. Lydia took a half step toward the exit, then stopped when the bailiff's eyes met hers. Mr. Bell touched my elbow, light as a comma. "One more form," he murmured. "Then you go home." I nodded, but my phone vibrated first, an unknown number lighting the screen. The preview line short as a blade. Regarding your husband's account, please call immediately. I looked up at Mr. Bell. There's still something open, I said, and the clock answered with one quiet, deliberate tick. Weeks don't heal, they rearrange. The house has learned my footsteps again. The blue savings jar is back on its 2 clean circles above the refrigerator, heavy with coins that sound like rain when I nudge them. Each morning I make coffee in Arthur's chipped mug and carry it to the porch where the new bulb glows steady over the rail. The clock inside ticks loud enough to be company. That call in the courthouse hallway led me to Mr. Keene, not a stranger. Something surfaced, he said, voice cautious the way good men are around luck. A quiet account Arthur had opened years back with a note in the memo line, porch and taxes, not a fortune. Enough. Paper remembering what love looks like when it writes checks for ordinary days. He slid across a photocopy of Arthur's handwriting. If you're reading this, I trust you got to keep choosing. My fingers shook, then steadied. The codicil did what it promised. The court filed its order, and the DA took the sealed exhibits the way a person receives a newborn, delicate, serious, eyes already doing math. There are meetings I don't attend. There are letters I put, unopened, into a drawer until Mr. Bell can stand beside me and read them out loud. Adrian hasn't come by. Lydia returned a casserole dish through Mrs. Doyle with a note that said simply, "Sorry for any confusion." Perfume clung to the paper. I washed my hands and felt no cleaner. Then I did anyway. This afternoon, I took Arthur's scarf from my handbag and folded it onto the arm of the porch chair. Cedar still rises, stubborn and kind. I set the ring box on the table and touched its groove the way you touch a scar that learned to stop hurting. Inside, the ring watches me without judgment. The key sleeps in the pocket seam where fabric remembers my thumb. I talk to you here because the porch doesn't argue. The hydrangeas need trimming. The step still complains on damp days. I keep the ledger open to the page where I've written small, unfancy victories. Bulb, paid, taxes, scheduled, tea declined, door locked when it should be, and open when I want it to be. A car slows in front of the house and moves on. The clock answers in its measured voice. My phone buzzes against the table, an unknown number offering the same preview line as before. Regarding your husband's account, please call immediately. I let it ring out. The jar glints. The scarf warms in the light like a living thing. I lift my coffee, breathe cedar and steam, and say the words out loud, for you and for the house. I am safe enough tonight. Tomorrow, I'll answer the phone.